Hello everyone and welcome back yet again to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. Happy Thursday to you all. We should have a great show ahead. We're actually going to be starting off in the world of college football today, and a very exciting crop of Week 13 games that could determine a lot of teams' fates in both conference title implications and CFP implications as well. Then we'd fully transition into the NFL. I'll be updating you on some key injuries that occurred this past week or some reoccurring injuries that you might have to monitor in terms of fantasy implications. Going to be making some picks for Week 12's biggest games as well. A lot of divisional rivalries that could determine certain seeding places in this very tight AFC and NFC playoff picture. Talk about some Week 12 prop bets. Very interesting players and storylines to follow, as always, in the National Football League this weekend. And last but not least, concluding by looking ahead to Sunday night's big NFC matchup between the Eagles and Rams. Very interesting game for both of those teams. But before we get into any of that fun stuff, I do want to remind you that if you want to view more content such as this or more exclusive short content, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show and the network. There are so many shows on the network, a lot of people doing a lot of great things for the network, and it's greatly appreciated by all, whatever you do for these shows. But if you want to interact with them a little bit more directly, you can do three things here. You can make yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube by either leaving a tip or donation through the $sign in the chat box in the comment section, or just leave any questions, comments, or concerns you might have throughout the show, and I will gladly read them on air. Or you can just go to our website, gsmcpodcast.net, and leave a tip or donation there. But either way, anything you do for this podcast is greatly appreciated, and I'm sure all the other podcasters in this network appreciate what you do for them as well. So be sure that if you feel so inclined to make yourselves available, these great ways to contribute and interact with the show. But without further ado, let's jump right into our first segment of the day, starting off in the world of college football. Let's talk about Week 13, because it could get pretty hectic here. I feel like so many different games could determine so many different things, whether it be what one-loss teams could surprisingly fall out of the race entirely should they lose this weekend, or determine that crazy Big 12 race as well. So many intriguing games to talk about, and perhaps one of the most important Army-Notre Dame games perhaps since the Second World War. So there was a lot to discuss in the world of college football. So without further ado, let's jump right into my favorite games this week and take a look at the betting perspective surrounding them. Starting off with perhaps the most important game in the Big Ten this weekend. Could determine a lot. Could determine how far Indiana falls, or whether or not they're even in the CFP picture to begin with after this game. It's at the Horseshoe, perhaps the toughest place Indiana has played under Curt Cignetti, and it will be the toughest place for Indiana to continue this hot streak, because Ohio State, yes, they have some flaws, but they're very few. They're a very well-rounded, complete football team who's playing clean football at this time, and they're starting to get some key players in rhythm now. We saw last week that Quinshon Judkins had a big day. This week, another player could go off. Maybe Emeka Egbuka can step up in this game. We really don't know week in, week out who in this talented Ohio State team is going to step up. And so that's what could frustrate Indiana in this one, because you have to account for so many different things happening that you kind of get lost in the game. And if Ohio State goes up early, chances are Indiana might not be able to claw their way back. But if you are Indiana, the main way that I see a path to winning this game or keeping it closer is by stopping the run. You have a very physical front if you're Indiana, with guys like JMU transfers Mikael Kamara, Aiden Fisher, that can get home on these guys, Judkins and Travion Henderson. In the back end, you got to hope that your guys like D'Angelo Pons can hold up because I feel like they're going to want to threaten you aerially, Ohio State, in this game. Really test your secondary depth. And so Indiana has to stop at least one component of this Ohio State offense to really try and get a couple stops that could swing the game in their favor. So even though there aren't many pathways I can potentially see to where Indiana can keep this one close in the horseshoe, they do have key aspects of their roster that can swing the game in their favor in certain moments. I'm not saying that it will be enough to win, but it can be closer than people expect. That being said, I do like Ohio State in this game at minus 11. The over-under is 54.5, and I just can't ignore the fact that this feels like a team that's ready to win the national title. I feel like, they might look ahead a little bit in this one to Michigan because they're going to want to win that game as well. Because if they lose that game, everything's up in the air in Columbus after that. But this is still an important game, and they're going to want to prove they are the dominant force in the Big Ten this weekend. So that game, I feel like, is going to be an interesting one to monitor, but it should be a pretty comfortable Ohio State win. Now let's get into the craziness of the Big 12. Arizona State. How about them? Perhaps the sneakiest Big 12 title contender coming out of the weeds to really be a shock team in this conference. Going up against BYU, a team that still controls its own destiny in terms of its path to the Big 12 conference title game, but just made it a little bit more complicated with that loss to Kansas. If they lose this game, ASU is in pole position in the driver's seat, really, to clinch a Big 12 conference title appearance. So in this one, it's going to be all about timeliness. If you're Arizona State, you're going to want to get your offense going. And if you're BYU, you're going to want to be as efficient as possible, not turn the football over, because in my opinion, ASU has the more electrifying offense in this matchup. Sam Leavitt, Cam Scatabo, one of the more underrated running backs in the country, and Jordan Tyson form a three-headed monster that you have to compensate for if you're BYU on the defensive end. And so this game's going to be really about BYU's offense trying to put up as many points as possible, potentially have to keep up with an electric ASU offense. That is why I feel Vegas feels that ASU are the favorites in this one, 3.5-point favorites at home. The over-under is 47.5. It could very well hit that over easily because these are two offenses that I feel are very efficient. One in BYU is going to want to score in terms of time of possession as well as putting points on the board. And also, if you're ASU, you're going to want to score as early and as often as possible to try and make this uncomfortable for BYU on the road. So in that case, I'm going to have to take Arizona State at home. They just have all the momentum out of all these Big 12 teams, I feel like. Outside of Colorado, they feel to me like the most fun team to watch, but also the most clean team to watch right now in the Big 12. And I feel like, should they get to the Big 12 conference title game, look out. They could be a bid stealer. So that is why I'm taking Arizona State in this one, just because I want to see this Big 12 race get even more messed up and funky, because it's a really good one to monitor if you're a Big 12 fan. Now let's talk about perhaps the biggest game in this rivalry since the World War II era. This is a huge game for both of these teams, potentially not as much in terms of CFP implications, because if this team wins, who's favorite, it's pretty determined that Army can't, stay in that group of 5 race for that final playoff pot, but it is going to still be an important game because I feel like Army can keep themselves in this game, unlike what Navy did, but it is still a huge mountain to climb playing against Notre Dame with a triple option offense. And I know it's a little bit different than Navy's, but I'm not certain that Bryson Daly is 100%, because if Bryson Daly is 100%, then I would have a little more confidence that this triple option offense can get going. But if he's not, then I kind of feel like Notre Dame's going to run away with them. They are 15.5-point favorites at Yankee Stadium, so it's a neutral field, so potentially that could be a factor. The over-under is 44.5. But I feel like right now, if you're Army, you're going to have a lot of things go your way in this matchup in order for you to win it. Because if you win this game, right, and then you beat Tulane, then by all means necessary, welcome to the CFP Army. But if you lose this game and win the AAC title, if you lose this game, rather, and win the AAC title, I'm not sure that's going to be enough to take over Boise State, because I'm going to remind you, Boise State, in my opinion, has the best loss in the country by 3 points to number 1 Oregon. And if Army loses this one in humiliating fashion and wins the ASC championship game, that's not telling us much about this Army team. So we need to see them come out swinging in this one. And we need to see a healthy Bryson Daly in order for this to be an exciting matchup. But I feel like I can't ignore the fact that Notre Dame looks like it's ready for the playoffs, and Riley Leonard has been leading the squad ever since that Texas A&M game really well. And so that's why I have to feel like Notre Dame is going to win this game pretty big. And so that's why I'm going to take them. Then the last one I want to cover really quickly, just for a fun kind of matchup if you're looking for a lower tier SEC matchup that's still going to be fun to watch. It's LSU Vanderbilt. LSU are 9.5-point favorites, but I still like this matchup just because these are two teams who are fun in different ways. LSU's fun because they have electrifying wide receivers led by an efficient quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier, who looks pretty pro-ready if you ask me. And then you have Vanderbilt's side of things, one of the most electrifying option dual threat quarterbacks in the country in Diego Pavia. And even though neither of these teams are SEC title contention, it's still a very, very intriguing matchup. I feel like this game could go either way, but I still think that I would take LSU if this game happened today. But maybe on Saturday, Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia show up like they have all season long with this very difficult to defend offense and potentially spring another surprise. And that's what I love about college football. The beauty of college football is that in quote-unquote meaningless games, you can get opportunities to see certain players shine who you might not have seen all season long. So I implore you to stay tuned to this game because it's going to be a fun one. I'm going to take Vanderbilt actually in this one, just because of that fun nature of their offense. And I really do think that Diego Pavia is someone super special that's finally getting the spotlight he deserves in this conference to showcase what he means for this Vanderbilt team. So with that being said, here are my picks in recap. Ohio State -11 at home against Indiana. Arizona State -3.5 at home against BYU. Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium, actually, 15.5-point favorites to win against Army, and Vanderbilt to win outright against LSU against the spread. But let me know what you think in the comments about this weekend in college football, because coming up next, we'll be looking at some injuries in the NFL, updating you on certain players' status, and also what that could mean for you in terms of fantasy this weekend. So we'll be right back after this short break to talk about that.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.